Hello there, Tom Tilley.
Hello, Lindsay McDougall. Big topic on today's show, day 3 of Sex Week, and we're talking about straight guys that dabble in gay sex. And I put this conversation out there on the Twitterverse today, and I got such a huge reaction from people saying it shouldn't matter, you know, if people want to experiment, it doesn't mean they should have to wear a particular label. And one person said, well, flip it on its head. What if a gay guy dabbles in straight sex? Does that make him any less gay?
That's a very good point.
Very interesting. And there's a guy in the US called Dan Savage. He's a very famous sex blogger. He's gay, and he mostly talks about gay issues. And this is how he addressed that topic.
There's a lesbian firefighter in Seattle, and she's that sort of androgynous combo that spins my crank. Her firehouse, whatever they're called, is by my office. I've walked past it, and for years I would like sort of, without thinking, like go, hey, wow, she's really a girl. You know, I would fuck her, and she's got tits and a vagina. I'll show you the videotape of me fucking her. And none of you will tell me I'm straight after watching it.
So there you go. A very different take on this subject.
I know, yeah. I mean, people are calling it a hetero-flexible, but then is there like homo-flexible as well?
Well, there is the Kinsey scale, which came out in the 40s and 50s, which basically is a 7-point scale of sexuality. Wow. So a lot bigger and more flexible, I guess, than the scale a lot of people talk about today, which is usually gay, straight or bi.
Yeah, it's like binary, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Well, I think just like Sanderson Jones, the comedian that was on my show today, we should all just hug each other for a very long period of time.
Does it really necessarily need to be categorised? That's the question. A hug is a hug, right?
Absolutely. As long as between consenting adults, it's fine.
Okay. Catch you later, man.
Cheers, man.
Sex. Talking about sex.
Penis goes in there.
Subversive idea.
And it warms up.
Talking about sex. On hand.
If a straight man has a gay sexual experience, or maybe a few gay sexual experiences, does that mean he's actually gay? Well, that is the big question we're asking today on day 3, not gay 3, of Triple J's week of talking about sex. I am Tom Tilley. You are listening to Hack. And a lot of people don't blink when a girl experiments with her sexuality. So why is it such a taboo when straight guys dabble? I want you to meet 28-year-old Drew. He has dabbled with gay sex, and he told reporter Alex Mann that because of the stigma around straight guys having gay sex, he thought long and hard about actually telling you his story on the radio. And just a warning that this story and most of the program today will contain some pretty explicit stuff.
The words gay and fag are thrown around with such candor that you really have this horrifying idea of what if I am? I don't want to be because I'll be singled out and picked on. I weighed this up in my head thinking about, do I use my real name? Do I say where I'm from? Do I say who I am or what I do? And the idea is that, yes, people should be comfortable with this kind of thing. And if my example of me being who I am and being happy with who I am encourages other people to do the same instead of hiding behind a nom de plume, then so be it. Hi, my name is Drew. I'm 28 and I work as a scientist in Brisbane. During my adolescence, I had a tendency to experiment, as all young adolescents do. I also then experimented into some of the taboo areas for a male, which is anal play. Through that, I discovered the prostate, which is the button, and it was fantastic. And it kind of broke down a little bit of a barrier of what is right and wrong in sexuality. There's a lot of people saying that you shouldn't do this or this is bad, or especially in high school, in the latter parts of high school, where you're really, really concerned about what your image is that you're projecting to people.
So were you worried that people would find out that you were experimenting at all?
Of course not. Of course not. This was all behind closed doors. This was at my own house, in my own pace, you know, in my own privacy. But the pressure was there in high school. Everyone's judging. University is where I met more like-minded people, where I was at the time share housing with a few friends, and one of them identified himself as bisexual. Now, both of us were in heterosexual relationships. However, he and his girlfriend at one point sat down and spoke to us and said, look, what is your thoughts on having, say, a threesome we had a talk and we thought that's a great idea, because we were both first-time sexual partners and we were kind of just learning off each other's fumblings. In a way of opening up our sexual repertoire, we decided to open the relationship and experience what other people had to give. Those threesomes potentially led into a foursome where there was the two men in the room, and there was a great deal of nervousness there. The next step up, which I would almost say that was very terrifying, I went upstairs and kind of confronted them. He was playing some computer game, she was reading a book, and I kind of just blurted out, I want to try a cock. Not because the thought of having intercourse with another man turned me on, but the potential for exploring that pleasure that I'd already enjoyed and taking it to the next level. We agreed. We got together as two couples, and with some foreplay, I was penetrated in a very slow, trusting and gentle manner, actually. And it was quite amazing. I remember one of my first utterances as it was happening was, "It's hot," in a temperature sense. I had to think about this. I came to the conclusion that no, this doesn't really change my outlook on sexuality. I still identify wholeheartedly as a heterosexual. I don't feel like that I've become a homosexual. I don't feel like I've become anything that I haven't been already. It's just that I've opened up my sexual repertoire to include something that other people would consider taboo, and other people would, and many people would consider to be labelling me forevermore as a homosexual. But I just don't feel that way.
Well, one person on the text line disagrees with you, Drew. One texter says, it means he's bi, of course. That's what bi means, after all. Same for girls, same for a gay guy sleeping with girls. That was 28-year-old Drew from Brisbane speaking there earlier, telling his story of trying gay sex a few times with his flatmate, and he was speaking there to our reporter, Alex Mann. I'd love to know your experience. If you are a straight guy that has tried gay sex or occasionally still does, how do you explain your sexuality? Give me a call.
Hack 1300 0555 36. Text 0439 75 7555. Triple J.
To find out why these labels exist and make understanding your sexuality difficult in some cases, I have Maria Pelota Chiaroli in the studio. She's a senior lecturer at Deakin Uni and she specialises in sexual diversity. She's written a book called Borderline Sexualities. Now, it seems that very few people, Maria, talk about this kind of thing where straight guys experience gay sex acts. Do you have any idea how common it really is?
Tom, from my research, it is common. What's not common is talking about it, but that's shifting too, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, there was a study from the Kinsey report. Alfred Kinsey, a famous American academic who did a study in the late 40s, early 50s that found that 37% of men had had at least one homosexual experience. Does recent research corroborate those findings?
Oh, look, it sure does. We haven't had any research that says, no, that was wrong. I mean, that research was done in the 50s, you know, and it still stands as a classic. Research that we've done ever since still shows that throughout history, throughout cultures, throughout time, people have had sex with all sorts of other people. We just have labels that are supposed to support us and give us the language to talk about what we like and who we like. They're not meant to constrain us.
What are the most common sorts of sexual acts that straight guys share with each other or with other gay guys?
Oh, look, there's such a wide range, and it also depends on things such as, you know, have they had a drink, have they done some drugs, you know, a whole lot of factors, situational, friendship. Like Drew's situation was so beautiful, it was consensual, it was negotiated, talked about, fantastic. Yeah, look, it can range from hugging and kissing to slapping to penetration with, you know, vibrators, fingers, penis, whatever. It's just such a wide range. Sometimes it's just that beautiful hugging and kissing and getting really passionate. The boy-on-boy action that we often attribute to the girl-on-girl action on the dance floor, for example.
What about masturbating together? Is that where it often starts for young guys?
It can. It certainly can. Where guys kind of like, and it's really interesting. So they don't experience that taboo, you know, hey, we're masturbating with each other and we're looking at each other. Often there'll be like some so-called straight porn on the internet or DVD or whatever, and they'll masturbate around each other, but pretend that it's really about what they're watching on television or whatever.
Yeah, I think that perplexes a lot of girls when they hear about guys sitting around a room together, all getting turned on by what they're watching on the screen, and, you know, at some stage masturbating.
And look, it could be a whole range of things. I mean, you know, they could be being turned on by the porn, by each other, by the situation, by a whole lot of things. And that's okay. You know, if everyone's happy in that room, that's fantastic.
Yeah, well, there's not too many people actually calling in. I just asked for callers. If you are a straight guy that has dabbled in gay sex, or, you know, you still do occasionally, I would love to hear your story. The calls aren't rushing in, so it attests to your theory that, and a lot of our observations from the hack team, that a lot of people don't want to talk about it. The number, of course, is 1300 0555 36. That's 1300 0555 36. Fred has called in. Fred, you proudly identify as bi. What do you think about straight guys that dabble in gay sex?
Yeah, I've always found it a little confusing, I suppose, that, and I can understand these guys don't want to call themselves gay. They're not. They're interested in women as well. But there is this third word, bi, which really actually identifies them quite well in my mind. Yeah, you know, if you like women and you like men, at least sometimes, then I think that you're somewhere in the bi spectrum.
But maybe it comes down to sort of a percentage along that spectrum, Fred, where they're just very occasionally hooking up with other men. Should they still wear that same label?
Well, I don't know. I think if they're comfortable with it, they probably would. Because, yeah, there's a huge spectrum of bi. You can be, you know, towards the straight end. You can be towards the gay end. It can be only at certain times or certain circumstances. But I think if it's something that you do more than once, like I can understand if you try it once and you never come back to it, you go, no, I'm straight.
Well, actually, we've got someone on the line with that. We've got someone on the line, Fred, with that exact experience. So thanks for the call. Jackson, you dabbled at 16. What happened?
Basically, I was just in a club underage, and I had a gay guy who thought I was pretty top shit.
You probably are, Jackson. So what happened?
I know I am, but anyway, he was hitting on me, and I gave him what he wanted, and basically just confirmed that I wasn't gay.
Yeah, and did you tell many people about that?
I told a few people, maybe just my closest friends, and for the most part, they were pretty much on the same page as I was.
They'd had an experience like that?
No, just they were able to relate to mine and saying, oh, well, at least now you know, basically.
Yeah. All right, Jackson, thanks so much for the call. Dan, you've dabbled. How did you cope with the thought of the label that might come with that?
I guess I probably struggled with the fact that a label wasn't really necessary. My housing arrangement, living with some flatmates that were gay, kind of introduced me a bit more to the world of how they live their life and the fact that they go about the very same things and do the very same things that I do. They just happen to have a sexual preference which is different to mine. And I became very close with them and ended up at one point when I was at a pretty low point in my life, and I don't think that was the main driver. I'd always been curious. But at a low point in my life, I'd connected to a friend that had been there when some other friends hadn't been around for me, and I knew he always liked me, and he'd always said, oh man, if you were gay, I think you're really nice, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, we slept together. It wasn't full penetration or anything, but there was a lot of intimacy and closeness and sitting on the bed and listening to music, and at the end of the day, I came away from that feeling a lot more open and accepting of other people, and I struggled for a little bit and thought, well, that happened and I didn't mind that and I came away from it quite happily. Did I therefore label myself bisexual? But ultimately, I don't think anyone should label themselves. There's no need to these days.
Did you go back for much more gay sex?
No, that was essentially my experience.
Right, okay. And how long ago was that?
About 5 or 6 years, and I've stayed good friends with that person, and we go to music festivals and hang out, and a very close friend now.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks so much for the call.
Cheers.
Now, we also have Rizza on the line. You dabbled with your best friend. What happened?
I got too close to my best mate and we ended up having gay sex, and it ruined the friendship.
Were you both straight guys as far as you knew before that point?
Yeah, like all our friends used to make out that we were too close, and like make jokes that we're all gay. And then one night we had sex, and then we never spoke again.
Why do you think you weren't able to keep the friendship after that? Was there an element of shame?
We just didn't want to disclose to all our friends that we were actually gay, and we feared that. And yeah, it was really heavy.
Do you regret that you weren't able to maybe work through that and somehow understand it and feel comfortable?
No, well, I've had a couple of gay experiences since, but I've never done it again with someone that was close to me because I was just too scared to get hurt again.
So do you consider yourself as gay?
No, I still like girls. I don't know. People identify me as gay, but I cover that up.
Yeah, right. Such an interesting story there, Rizza. Thanks so much for the call. In the studio, I have Maria Pelota Chiarola, a senior lecturer and a specialist in sexual diversity. Very interesting stories there.
Sure.
Why do you think
yeah.
the label troubles people so much?
It troubles, I mean, the label bisexuality is a label that most of the young people I've worked with, the young guys I've worked with do tend to use. It troubles both gay and straight because what it means is that it apparently comes across as more messy. Like if you're gay, then we know where you are, we can put you in that box. If you're straight, we know where you are, we can put you in that box. If you're bisexual or moving along the Kinsey scale, it's much more difficult, but it actually isn't. It's just about discussion and communication. Can I say, Tom, it's harder for straight guys still because most straight guys are brought up, or most guys are brought up to think you're the one who's going to be doing the penetrating, you're the one who's going to be watching girl-on-girl action, you're the one who's not supposed to be in a position of being penetrated or fancying another guy. It's homophobia, it's misogyny, but it's also what my friend Wayne Martino calls femmephobia, fear of being called a girl, fear of being seen as feminine, and only girls get penetrated.
Yeah, you mentioned there the Kinsey scale, which is a 7-point scale of sexuality that came out after that study in the 40s and 50s. And it's very interesting that society today sees sexuality in a much more binary way, and it certainly hasn't always been that way. We'll come back to you in a moment, Maria, but John Barrington finds out that being straight or gay is actually a relatively new social construct. And just a warning again that this story has some pretty full-on language.
A history of sexual norms with the ANU's Dr. David West and Professor Rosemary Coates from Curtin University. Lesson 1, Sexual Norms in Ancient Greece and Rome.
At that time, the norm was quite different. The people weren't worried about what sex people's partners were. They were more worried about who was active and who was passive. Being active was the one who penetrated, and being passive was the one who was penetrated.
The wealthy men, and men in general, were much more at liberty to express their sexuality in a wide variety of ways, which included sex with young boys, sex with slaves, obviously sex with women, and in some circumstances, sex with animals as well.
Lesson 2, Sexual Norms in Pagan Times.
Paganism generally, and Greeks and Romans were part of that, saw sex as something great, something to do with fertility, ecstasy, with amazing experiences. They saw it as something that was powerful and something that was to be enjoyed. If you look at India, there was the Kama Sutra, which has become famous in the West for its sexual positions and description of how to get the most pleasure. But it was also about love and marriage and how to live well, how to live happily.
Lesson 3, Religion and Sexual Norms.
St. Thomas Aquinas is a key figure who really sets out the rules in a very strict way. And it's all based on sex is only justified if it leads to reproduction. And pleasure is seen as a bit of a problem because pleasure leads people to do it more than they need to. It leads them to do it with people who are not going to have babies.
For a very small group of people to control an entire community, then they have to strike fear into the hearts of the large group of people, and they do that through laws that control who you can marry, laws that control your sexuality.
The term faggot comes from that kind of burning people at the stake, because people were seen like witches. They were defying God, defying nature, so it was heresy. But even into the 20th century, people were imprisoned for gay acts. Men. I mean, women haven't been imprisoned for that. It wasn't recognised as a crime in most places.
Lesson 4, Labelling Sexuality.
Terms like homosexual came about really in the 19th century when there was a lot of scientists studying sexuality and categorising all the variation. Homosexual was a kind of medical term, which actually was coined before the term heterosexual. But then terms like gay and lesbian come out of the gay liberation movement. You know, they were terms that were positive, that weren't about a kind of medical condition.
Lesson 5, modern-day sexual norms.
With the advent of the Second World War in Europe, there was a degree of liberation for women because they had to substitute for the absent men who were sent overseas. And the uncertainties of war always increase the level of overt sexuality. But then there was a return to conservatism in the 1950s, and thank God for the hippies.
I suppose a big factor is contraception and antibiotics. You know, two things that became widespread in the 60s. It was the beginning of saying, well, sex is about pleasure, not just about reproduction or marriage. Now, and once you say sex is about pleasure, then why not pleasure between two men? Or why not pleasure between two women? Gradually, it just seems that there's been a wave that's got bigger and bigger, you know, to the point where it's a dramatic change from prison 30 years ago to do we have gay marriage now?
A very interesting history of categorising sexuality, which can cause people so many problems when they do have the desire to dabble into gay sex when they see themselves as a straight person. Yes, we are talking about straight guys dabbling on Hack today. It's day 3 of a week where we're devoting the whole program to talking about sex. Now, Danny, must have been interesting for you to hear that story there, looking at the history of the way sexuality's been defined. You actually thought you were gay when you were younger. What happened?
Yeah, well, not so much gay. I think I experimented a lot. I was one of the lucky ones, like not to be restricted by my inhibitions. So, yeah, but unfortunately my time was like probably 15 years ago. I actually was forced to experiment with gay men rather than, yeah, sort of experimenting with heterosexual men. But yeah, obviously, I mean, I'm happily married now, and yeah.
Do you still feel like dabbling sometimes, even though you're married, or was it something that happened at a certain point in your life and you've moved on from it?
Yeah, well, there's always a connection. Like when you meet someone, you know, that you share a connection with. It's always been attractive to me. Like no matter what sort of shape or form.
Have you talked to your wife? Have
not
you
the animal thing.
That's good to know, Danny. Thanks for clearing that up. But what does your wife think about this? Does she know that you are still attracted to guys sometimes?
Yeah, no, she knows I've dabbled, but I think she's obviously confident because I'm madly in love with her. So there's no one else that can fill that hole. So
you don't expect that you will dabble again? That you'll stay faithful to her?
No, I mean, there's always people that you come across, whether they be female or male, that you share a little connection with. But I think I've found my mate, so I'm pretty comfortable.
Well, I'm happy for you, Danny. Thanks so much for that call.
No, thank you.
Blake, your girlfriend doesn't mind that you dabble.
No, well, she actually inspires me to, and I don't dabble all that much. In fact, the relationship was solely between her and myself, but she's definitely inspired me to dabble, and I inspire her as well to dabble, not only with other men, but with other women as well. Yeah.
So how did that come about? Had you already dabbled before you met her?
Yeah, I actually went through a stage when I was younger, and during the stage I was working in bars and I was partying a lot, and I was quite confused, and I experimented a bit, and I enjoyed it for a good while, up until I actually ended up having sex with a guy, and that actually was quite not as enjoyable. And after that, I sort of just stopped completely, and I was sure that I was straight, but then I realised that actually I'm not. And I do have a view on this, and it does tie a lot in with the guest speaker that you had on earlier from the university about labelling. And the truth is, you can love anyone, and whether they're male or female, and you can also take that up a notch as well if you're open to it. However, society does divide people with laws and expectations of people, and so do parents, and everything does, and therefore it forces people to label. And by doing that, people don't even necessarily even question what level of someone might be breaking the law or the social norm or anything like that, but they just categorize them into one category, and then they deal with them in the way that they feel like they should deal with them because they're gay, or
Yeah, it makes it maybe easier for them because they have a set of assumptions about somebody. Blake, how do you label yourself, or are you able to sort of go through life not labelling yourself?
Oh, well, I mean, I guess if I was to label myself, I'd say I'm bisexual. But, I mean, the truth is I don't look at men as attractive at all. In fact, I solely do it more as, well, I mean, I definitely can be attracted to guys, but it's not on a physical level. It's more on a mental level because I'm not physically attracted to men. But I definitely do enjoy being in a relationship with a guy, especially if there's a woman involved or if there's other friends of mine, other male friends involved, because it's hot, you know, it is sexy and it does feel bad, or not bad, but it does feel like you're doing the wrong thing, and that's probably perhaps because of the stigma that's been attached to it, you know. But yeah, that's...
Yeah, all right, well, that's a very interesting point of view, Blake. Thanks so much for your call.
No worries, thank you.
A few people are texting in. One person says, more men should be as open as these guys as they're talking about their sexual experiences on the radio. It's so beautiful. Another person says, the problem is the label. Guys don't want to have a label. They just want to be who they are and find out who they are. No need to label themselves as gay, bi, straight. They're just human. Very nice. Another person says, I'm a girl and I've had sex with girls a couple of times before. I don't consider myself bisexual. I don't have the romantic feelings for females that I have with males. And that brings up a very interesting point because this whole conversation is basically taboo, talking about guys having sex if they do see themselves as straight. But it's a lot more commonplace when women share sexual experiences between themselves but don't necessarily label themselves. So we asked the question, and Claire Ed has this report about whether women basically have a more fluid sexuality or whether society just lets them.
Probably the most surprising finding of the study was how often women changed the way that they thought about their sexual identity over time.
Lisa Diamond is a psychologist at the University of Utah in the United States. She's tracked nearly 80 young sexual minority women who identified as lesbian, bisexual or unlabelled over 10 years. Now, she found that for some women, love and desire are not strictly heterosexual or homosexual, but fluid. Almost 70% changed their identity labels at least once during the decade, and the most commonly adopted identity was unlabelled. Here she is talking online with Big Think.
We used to think that change was really freaky and that stability was the norm, and now we know that we had it upside down. Stability is actually pretty uncommon, and transition and change are actually the norm.
Lisa Diamond believes that there is capacity for fluidity in both men and women, but it appears to be stronger for women. 2007 research from the University of Toronto found that when it comes to viewing sexual images, men respond to gender, whereas what women find attractive is much less fixed. Here in Australia, a national survey of nearly 750 same-sex attracted youth found that women displayed more fluidity with regard to their sexual feelings, behaviours and their identities. Young women were also more likely to be exploring lesbianism while participating in heterosexual relationships at the same time.
So women have been given permission for many, many years to be able to hug their friends, to be quite expressive with their friends. Men haven't been given the same permission.
Kirsten McLean is a senior lecturer in sociology at Monash University.
I think from the research that I've done, the women that I interviewed talked about the fact that some of their quite intense female friendships that are perfectly sanctioned in our society allowed them to think about women as sexual partners as well. Those kind of boundaries are quite strict with men.
Kirsten McLean believes both men and women's sexuality can be fluid, but the research so far has tended to focus on women who are also more at ease with the concept.
The fact that labels may not necessarily have strict boundaries around them, so they may be heterosexual but have same-sex relationships or sexual experiences.
So is there a pattern amongst people who identify their sexuality as fluid or don't label themselves at all?
People who kind of come to sexual fluidity come from a whole range of kind of areas. Some of them have previously identified as gay or lesbian and decided that perhaps they wanted to try heterosexuality for a while and have discovered that that's all right for them too. Some of them are bisexual people who find the bisexual label a little bit limiting, and quite a few of them are probably heterosexual people who now have more permission to experiment with their sexuality. And there's other people who say, well, this is what my life is. It's less about gender, it's more about the personality of the person.
Claire Ed reporting there on the fluid sexuality of women. And in the studio, I have Maria Pelota. She's a senior lecturer at Deakin who specialises in sexual diversity. She's written a book called Borderline Sexualities. Maria, why do you think that women tend to have a more fluid sexuality?
Oh, look, I totally agree with the brilliant work of Kirsten McLean and Lisa Diamond, and it's about permission and the fact that women have been given permission to explore because...
So it's not innate, it is a societal thing?
Well, it could be innate, it could be social. We haven't got enough data. All we do know is that it's very much because it feeds into what makes girls popular for boys. Men have got power. Men love watching girl-on-girl stuff, so girls get power through that. The problem with men is that the boundaries around guys is, you're supposed to be the puppeteer. You're supposed to be getting girls to do this for you. You don't do this with other guys because it's about your masculinity comes into question. And so what we need now is, as we're finding, more and more women, more and more girls are giving permission to their partners, their boyfriends, going, hey, let's talk about this, let's negotiate it, let's get it out there safely. You do it, because actually there's a lot more and more young women who are coming out and saying, I love boy-on-boy action. I love watching this. I love bi guys. There's new words coming out, Tom, called girl fags, fantasies.
Right.
There's a whole slash fiction genre, the yaoi in Japan. So more and more young women are saying, I find it hot too. And so it's girls also having permission to go, I want this power. I want to be in control. I want to watch guys do things for me.
Yeah, very interesting. One person has texted in saying, almost every time I almost come out as a lesbian, one of my straight friends tells me about their one-off sexual experience they've had with another woman. Oh, Maria, it just goes on and on, this conversation. But I thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Oh, thank you. I mean, could I just add one more point, Tom, about, let's not forget, guys have got this really interesting part of their anatomy called the prostate. And the prostate is a part where some guys really enjoy having it touched,
Well, that's
penetrated.
right. Mick's just texted in saying he likes his girlfriend using a strap-on, but he's not into guys.
Yeah, look, whatever, it's part of our bodies. I believe in the www, whoever, whenever, and whatever you do it safely, do it consensually, have a lot of fun, so long as it's all out there talked about.
Oh, Maria, well, we have gotten it all out there today. Thanks so much for joining us.
You're most welcome. Thank you for putting this out there.
Yeah, my pleasure. Maria Pelota, that's from Deakin University. And thank you so much for all your amazing calls and texts today. If it brought up any tough issues for you, you can call Lifeline 13 11 14. Tomorrow, as we continue our sexual journey on Hack, we'll be talking about